John, I'm so glad to have you here, and I want to hear about Shadowball and Vaquero, the podcast you're working on. Please introduce yourself and take over here.
Well, thank you, Rick. So I'm here with both Matthew Hatchette, we call him Hatch, and PG down there, we call him Paulie. I'm going to put up the deck quickly just for context because it will help, and then we'll get into the two podcasts, the two podcasts that we're talking about, and then we'll come back to the conversation part. I think it'll be easier to do it that way. Plus, I spent all this time doing this deck, so I wouldn't want that to go to waste.
Hey, John, I'm going to jump in real quick before you start this.
Yes.
Give us just the 30 seconds of who you are and,
Okay.
and what your background is, so everybody knows you.
Happy to do that. So me personally, so I come out of the movie space. I'm a longtime movie producer. I've produced over 20 movies, probably. I've been an executive on another 15 or so. Made movies, produced movies over $100 million, under $1 million, and everything in between. I've written, produced, directed, and acted. In the last instance, badly. So that's not going to happen again. And have really sort of looked at the content entertainment space change dramatically in the past 5 years. It's been just from my perspective, a roller coaster ride. And what I've been noticing is how the opportunities have skyrocketed, while certain areas have diminished, other areas have just exploded. So we're really interested in exploring sort of where the opportunities are going by way of telling stories that are sort of completely out of fashion for the ways that we tend to tell stories, and that would be movies and TV. So we landed on podcasts, and the reason is what I noticed was, so the more you're spending on content, the smaller your voice becomes. And what we were really interested in doing is trying to figure out how to amplify that. And with the podcast space, and Paul and Hatch have been doing a lot of podcasts, I'll let them talk about their side of things, is you can tell stories that you just can't get up and running in the other areas. So really excited to tell stories that move the needle. We like to call it, there's positive social impact is sort of the way we think about all our stories. We look at everything through that lens. And if we're gonna make stories in this space, they actually have to matter. They can't be things that don't matter. Otherwise, why are we doing it? Anyway, so that's sort of our aesthetic. And I've said enough. Hatch, why don't you talk a little bit about you and where you're up to?
So yeah, Matthew Hatchette. So basically I came from the sports world, 8-year NFL veteran, played receiver for the New York Jets, Minnesota Vikings, and Jacksonville Jaguars. And after that, just threw myself into the Hollywood business of movie making. And like John just said, it's over the last 10 years, it's changing. And again, 2010 to go, we're all chasing your Sonys and Lionsgate and say, buy our movie and partner with us. And just really 5-6 years ago, the Netflix has come on the scene and has changed the whole dynamic. So, I enjoy it, the movie making portion of it. But again, the podcast space is something we have a little bit more control of. Right now, I have a podcast with myself and Terrell Owens. Again, we're both retired football players, but we don't really talk about football, right? We'll go from one episode to Michael Strahan. Then next week might have on Ice Cube. Then we'll go back and have Randy Moss on. Then we'll go and have Cedric the Entertainer on. And through all of these stories that we're telling with the entertainer or celebrity, it's the transitions that they go through, right? People see them as this celebrity or this athlete, but what they do to get there, like that's more important to the story for the athlete and the entertainer as well as it is for the person listening. So they can kind of go through those same things in their life tribulations and saying, I can overcome certain things and I can be whatever I want. So our podcast is really about sports and entertainment. And of course, myself and Paulie have partnered on numerous other podcasts. And again, I'll let Paulie go ahead and talk about those as well.
Thank you, Matt. I come from film background, film and TV for a long time, and I've had some success I'm really grateful for. John gave me my first break. As a matter of fact, last year was a good year for me. A movie on Netflix. It was debuted #1 in January. It's Cutthroat City with RZA directed it with Ethan Hawke and Wesley Snipes. Really good cast. Anyway, so I've been in the podcast space for about 4 years, and I really love it for a couple of reasons. #1, from inception to production to distribution is light speed compared to film and TV. #2, there's a purity to the storytelling that I really like. We do scripted narratives. Our first one was Top 10 Apple, a crime. I work with federal agents, so we did a series called The Undercovers with Ed O'Neill. We're just finishing up season 3 now. Matt and I just did a podcast for Dan Patrick and iHeartRadio called Westward. It's about the birth of basketball in LA. And it features Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, a lot of great, but it's also like all of our stories, we're telling stories behind the stories. So it's also about culture, the cultural shift that came with it. The racial undertone of basketball and the explosion of that with the Showtime era. So there's a lot of moving parts to our storytelling that we're really proud of. Telling stories for us is, we say we want to have a massive audience. We want to have an inclusive audience. It's not a punchline for us. We like material that speaks to everybody, that has universal themes, and tells sort of pieces of history that haven't been told before. So that's about it.
So Rick, I was going to put up our deck, but we've already covered half of it, so that's probably not really a reason to. Thanks for getting it started quickly there. So maybe what we should do is jump into the couple of projects that we're talking about, the 2 podcasts. And what I would say is kind of part of the reason, the way we've been thinking about it is podcasts have a sort of lower barrier for entry when it comes to financing and distribution. So it makes it a lot easier for us to create it up front and then push it downstream, push it into a limited series, ongoing series, movie. It's sort of as a test case for bigger content downstream. We really, really like it for that. So we're going to be doing a lot of this stuff. And part of the interesting thing for me with respect to brand sponsors is we build the audience up front, and then we can carry the brands, the sponsors downstream with us. So it's kind of an interesting way to look at it. So we want to do is build it here and then go downstream with everybody. So that's the basic idea. So the first project that is up next is something called Shadowball, and Hatch can speak to this, and Polly will probably jump in along the way. The second one is called Vaquero, but we'll get to that next. So Hatch, why don't you jump in on Shadowball?
Yeah, well, like you said, it's kind of, it came from another podcast, basically. I mean, the whole conception of it was, we were interviewing Elgin Baylor on his last interview before he passed away. And he was telling us in 1959 that he was actually the first athlete to protest. And again, I didn't even know this story. And this is 1959 when he was with the Minneapolis Lakers. I guess the team, they wouldn't let him stay at the team hotel. So he said he wasn't going to play the next day. And of course that gets, me thinking, and then Polly tells me about the story, about the old Negro League Baseball League. When they were practicing, they were like literally using a shadow of the actual ball. So they didn't have an actual ball. They were swinging at air. And they came up with this thing called Shadowball. And that's in the 1920s. So of course, now it's 2021, the whole Colin Kaepernick situation that's been going on for the last 8-9 years. And all of us athletes, do you protest, not protest, career? It's been 100 years. And I think there's something there that we need to tell the story, tell the journey on, what is it? Is it the sport? Is it our society? Is one controlling the other? Nobody knows, but we want to kind of get this story or, this narrative out there. Again, this has been going on for 100 years and we need to talk about it. We want to tell the story. There's great stories there. And we definitely think that, we can tell it through a cinematic piece, through via a podcast.
Yeah, well put, Matthew. Yeah, the Shadowball is a story that's really, special to both of us. It's super cool because it's not only is it a historical exploration, but what the relevance that it has today. But it's not just a series of stories that are, depressing, that have these, sort of, our first story is about a football player from Iowa State that was literally lynched on the field. He was piled on, he was killed. Wonderful young man. But they named a stadium after him and they commemorate his memory every year. We interviewed his sole relative that is alive today. And sort of, we want to share these stories that haven't been told yet. Or maybe if they have, let's remind people about it, but also maybe some encouragement and some hope that, we are, even if it's incremental, we are making progress. And the way we do that is to keep telling these stories and remind us of this history in a cool, entertaining way that's also touching and inspiring.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here and just ask people on the Zoom right now. Does anybody know the story of John Jack Trice? Has anyone heard it besides you guys?
I just learned about it a few weeks ago on like a Smithsonian Channel thing. I think it was they're doing like Aerial America over Iowa, and they were explaining why the stadium was named after him. But we were all kind of just listening to the story, just jaw dropped about it because we weren't expecting it to go. We weren't expecting that kind of story to be why that stadium was named like that. So that stuck with us for sure when we learned about it.
I want to know more about it right now. When did this happen?
Well, it's really an incredible story, and it happened in 1951. What is it?
1923.
Oh, well, okay, I missed it. Okay,
live.
Yeah. Anyway, the story is, the interesting thing caught me is I found it reprinted in his suit that he wore to the game. He wrote a note to his parents about how proud he wanted to make his family by playing in this game, and he knew that they were going to come after him as a Negro player, and yet he still played. And the super tragic thing about it is that he had been injured early in the game by them piling on him, but he wouldn't take himself out of the game, and he played both offense and defense. So anyway, they piled on him and killed him, and then they found the note in his suit when they put the suit on him for his funeral, just very. But there was some good that came out of it. Not just the stadium being named after him. The entire school took the week off because it was played in Minnesota. They protested the game. They took the week off of school, had a tribute to him, and they have a tribute to him every year to this day at Iowa State.
Well, if it's 1923, it's coming up on 100-year anniversary. Where's the documentary film being produced on this story?
Well, so Rick, so what you just said is precisely what we're interested in, which is let's do the podcast. We can drill down into a podcast. We can do it fairly quickly, fairly easily, and then we can push it into a docuseries, and the docuseries will sort of expand its reach. And what we're interested in is actually reaching people. So anything we can do to actually create popular entertainment that has some meaning to it is really sort of the idea behind what we're doing. And the podcast is sort of the entry point for us. It's a little harder to make that into a movie straight away, given, Marvel is your competition. So it makes a lot more sense to start it here and then keep pushing it downstream and making it bigger and broader based in its appeal.
So I don't want to take over on your presentation here, but tell us what do you want from a brand? How does a brand support this?
Well, it's an interesting one. Obviously, brands in and around the sports space. What we've been noticing, I actually have I don't want to put up the slide now because it feels like we're just having conversations around it. Well, I think there's any number of ways a brand can participate in the podcast space, because the way the ad dollars are flowing into the space. It's been actually fairly impressive over the past 2 years, the growth that we've been seeing. And so there's, it's an audio format. So there's mid-roll, there's the beginning, there's the end. It can be a straight sponsorship of the entire season. The way we're breaking it up, and Paul, if you want to speak to this, because Paul has more expertise than I do in this area, is a brand can sponsor the entire series, which is really 10, 30-minute shows, and with a couple of bonus shows as well. So there's any number of ways we can integrate them into the 10 episodes, call it. It's 300 minutes of programming, audio programming, and there are places we could do what is popular now, which is the narrator read ads. There's the mid rolls. There's all the rest of that they can integrate. We would prefer to have a singular sponsor help us with the entire show, so we don't have to muck around with much. It would be better for the topic. Did I forget anything there, Paulie?
No, well done.
Good.
Hey, John, can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Maybe a stupid question, but since this content, you saw Rick's face, is so compelling and amazing, and it feels like Budweiser would come on board in 34 seconds, but putting that aside, why aren't you just going to iHeart or Podcast One? It's their job to bring brands on, and boom.
Yeah. If I could interrupt here, we have several podcasts. We have a deal with Global. Our Westward is with iHeart and Dan Patrick. And to answer your question, is because they take the derivatives. We want to control the downstream.
Okay.
So they're really buying the IP. That's what they're doing. Yes,
Correct.
They bring in branding partners. And we work, first of all, they've been great partners, but we want to control the IP. It's not a matter, we'll give out some of it when we go to a platform, but we still want to be able to control it, to say, hey, we want to turn this into a mini series. We want to turn it into a docu-series or a movie. So we want to have that power.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so our expertise in particular is in the derivatives, and that's the last thing we want to give away. Not that Paulie and Matthew Hatch have been making lots of podcasts. I'm just saying that in particular, we understand how to push these things downstream. So we're happy to partner with people. We just don't want to
Give it away.
Fair enough.
Hey, John, I had a question for you. Have you guys looked at other kind of similar podcasts? And I mean, both in terms of, like, if you're looking at like a serial, like something that really took off and then had all these doors open to become feature films and become things beyond podcast, or similar podcasts. I'm thinking about like The Edge, like that series they did about the Houston Astros cheating scandal, and just how they were kind of these self-contained things, but I feel like kind of broke free from the typical podcast marketing vehicle, I guess, because podcasts are so niche, right? You listen to your true crime, you listen to your sports podcasts, you listen to your news podcast, but then once in a great while, these ones come along like this, like the Astros one. And what I'm hoping is like Shadowball, right? Where it's really cross-sectional, and there's, this is the kind of podcast that myself, my wife, my whole family would listen to and all be interested in different like parts of it. So if you looked at past series that have done kind of what you guys are trying to do and learn lessons kind of either good or bad from them.
Well, I think there's lots of lessons to be learned from the folks who have come before us, for sure. The way we're generally thinking about all of our podcasts, Shadowball, and then also Vaquero in general, is we look at them sort of like franchises, if you will. So season 1, we're going to focus on a part of this issue. Season 2 is going to be the same issue, different characters. Season 3, same thing. So we're trying to move them so that we can create, a universe, if you will, around this theme. And in doing so, each time you do a new show, you create more gravity around Shadowball. So yeah, Serial is a great example. They've done an amazing job with that. And part of it is because it's really good. So and the research they've done is amazing. So we would like to, for sure, take some information, certainly what they've done, and apply it to what we're doing.
Hey, John,
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm going to give you the 2.5-minute warning right now.
Okay.
But you haven't mentioned anything about Vaquero yet. And if you want to do that, now would be the time.
Thank you, Paulie. Thank you, Rick, for the 2.5-minute warning. So Paul, it's back to you. This is near and dear to his heart because He wrote the novel on which it is based, and been busy in this space.
Right. I'll give you the Reader's Digest. First of all, Tom, back to your question, and this is why I've worked with John for so long, and Matt. We are storytellers to begin with, and the thing that those other things have in common is they're great storytelling, and that's what we want to do. We do scripted narrative, episodic, that is storytelling. For Vaquero, if you want to put that thumbnail up, John, as we mentioned, we do a series called The Undercovers. Well, I came across an agent named Hector Berreyes, who was one of the first agents of the DEA. He worked the border, the most decorated agent in the history of the DEA. And when we were doing a lot of these interviews with witnesses and stuff, most of them are from either Mexico or South Tucson, and they all said, "Where's the stuff for Latinx? Where's the stuff for us? Where's our story?" So we created this series, and Hector Berreyes, based on the book The Last Narc, it turned into a documentary for Amazon, a 4-part series. Attila Rosser directed it, did really well for him, but that was only 20% of Hector's story. That was more about the Kiki Camarena murder, but Hector's story is incredible. And we're going to stay, and the interesting thing about this is we're doing this bilingual also. We're doing this in Spanish for the Latinx market. So it's going to be our first one. So we don't want, like I said, we want a wide audience. We want to share our stories and be inclusive with as many people that we can. So we're very excited about this series because it's very close to me, because Hector and I have become friends over the years, and it's going to be really cool.
There, I think we squeaked in there, and plus I got to put the deck up, so I'm happy about that.
Well, terrific. You were 15 seconds away, but I've got 2 questions left here. One's for Polly. It's like, where are you, like in Waikiki or something? Where are you?
Usually I am locked behind my computer in Santa Monica, but I'm actually, I just got a wonderful job, a book adaptation for a book called Unstoppable. It's an amazing story about a Holocaust survivor. So I'm with his son in Miami. So I do not have this cushy life. I'm usually in a box somewhere with a computer screen in front of me.
That's not Detroit behind you.
No, it ain't Detroit.
And then I got a question for you, Hatch.
Yes, sir.
You caught 60 NFL passes, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
What's your most memorable?
The NFC championship game in 1998, when we were supposed to go to the Super Bowl. That put us up by 10 points, and we were supposed to win that game, and we still end up losing that game and not going to the Super Bowl. So.
Oh my! And what was the pass? Who threw you the pass?
Randall Cunningham.
Oh man!
You guys might be too young to remember Randall.
Awesome. What great stories. Hey, you guys, thanks so much for participating today. We wish you well. We're all here to help you with this. So the recording is going to be passed along, and it'll be available for you guys here tomorrow as well. So stick around. We have another one coming up here.